Good evening and welcome to this month's MindSmith Live. Like the first Thursday of every month, we are going to talk on a particular topic on mental health from the MindSmith studio. This month's topic is men's mental health. And as has been very tragically brought to focus very recently, the death by suicide of a very prominent Bollywood personality just a couple of days back, it again forces us to think about men's mental health and what we are not doing right, what are we not able to address as a society and as mental health professionals and as mental health uh, workers in terms of men's mental health. Now, there is a certain very strong cultural context to it. When we talk about Indian men, and especially not only Indian, I think we can extend the argument to Southeast Asian men and men as the half of the species. It is seen that men are culturally the providers. They are societically expected to be strong, to be resilient, to be the providers. And hence, it is never encouraged that they talk about emotions or they talk about emotional health. So, men, as the physically stronger, but sometimes emotionally weaker sex, definitely biologically weaker sex, need to start talking more openly about mental health, about emotional health, about difficult topics, about difficult conversations. It has been seen historically that when it comes to the more severe part of mental health crisis, which in our case, what we have observed in the present world is probably a completed suicide, which we can take as the ultimate outcome of poor mental health gone to the worst part. What is required is that men need to start working on things which help reduce this particular burden of more and more young people dying because of suicide. Now, it has been seen historically that women as a general group attempt suicidal uh, attempt to die by suicide more commonly, but men are seen to complete those suicides in a larger number of cases. It is simply because men tend to use more violent and more brutal methods to ensure that the suicide is completed. Firearms, easy access to firearms, as well as access to motor vehicles, access to heavy machinery, and using more brutal methods to turn upon themselves. This results in a larger number of men dying because of completed suicide. And it's one of the largest or one of the biggest causes of preventable death amongst men. And it has very recently overtaken accidents as the major cause of death among young men. When it comes to mental health, emotions are something which men usually struggle to talk about. Talking about anxiety for a man may be seen and wrongly perceived as a sign of weakness. It is, of course, human, and it is something which anybody can be afflicted from. It's a disease. Anxiety disorders, mood disorders, substance abuse, many a times do not have agency, as in we do not have a choice as to who is going to get anxiety disorders or who is going to have a higher vulnerability for using substances. But men, as a rule, tend to gravitate more towards substance use and see it as a form of bravado to be able to consume higher levels of substances and to exhibit more risky behavior when it comes to substance use. Now, this has happened over the years, over millennia rather, because of the way men and their brains are programmed and wired a little differently from women. Men traditionally have had to go into the more aggressive part of the hunter, whereas women traditionally have mostly been into the part of the gatherers. During the maximum or the largest amount of human years of evolution, in which the human species was hunter and gatherer by its very definition. Humans would forage a particular area and get into groups where they could hunt together and get into groups where they could find edible plants, plant matter, or even dead animal matter, plus running streams of water, plus bonuses like fruit and very calorie rich diets like honey, which also explains our natural craving for sweet food, which is a very recent phenomenon in the entire evolution of human society. Only very recently have we started becoming abundant in terms of food and in terms of availability of resources. We have been able to domesticate agriculture over the past few thousand years, which has led to an abundance of food. We have better healthcare now. We have no known predators which are a regular threat to any population species. We are the dominant species on the planet. And therefore, what has happened over time is that we have created a society of abundance around us in terms of accessibility to resources, accessibility to calorie rich foods, which have brought on its own set of problems, especially for men. Since the body craves sweet and the body has a natural tendency to look at sweet food as a rare and calorie rich entity, it tends to overindulge whenever the food is available. More so in cases where psychologically we are trying to fill in a particular emptiness inside us or a particular perceived deficiency, or as a response to probably mood disorder or anxiety disorder, we tend to gouge on these foods, which lead to lifestyle disorders. The mental health for men, now, the master organ of the human system, the brain, is responsible for the health of every system of human body. And for all the complexity of the human brain, its main work remains exceptionally simple. The human brain only needs to provide a system of equilibrium within which the human animal can operate. Whenever the amount of stress, internal or external, increases and overwhelms the brain's capacity to maintain that equilibrium, it is manifested as mental health disorders or diseases. These disorders, most commonly in these times, will be falling under the category of anxiety disorders. Closely on the heels of anxiety disorders, we will see mood disorders, which we primarily know as depression, and in rarer cases, bipolar disorder, which is from extreme low mood towards the other pole, which is exceptionally high, exa- exaggerated emotional response. Mood disorders, as a general rule, when we study mood disorders as students of psychiatry, they are known to have a very close overlap with substance use issues. Substance use disorder, broadly classified from the quantum of the problem statement into alcohol, opiates, and then hallucinogens, as well as substances which excite, like like cocaine, like amphetamines. So these substances, when coupled with a mood disorder, they create a dual diagnosis. And men are especially vulnerable to susceptibility and to suffer from both these disorders at the same time. And one needs to be very careful about one's own behaviors and one's own cycles of behaviors to be able to detect these disease entities early. And like any disease in the human system, what is important is that uh, these particular symptoms be identified early and the treatment for them be started as soon as possible. Now, it is very common for these diseases to not be detected. And the biggest reason for that is that we are not able to understand that our behavior stems from our biology, which means that many things which we shrug off as a consequence of some early age trauma, oblique current life stressors, oblique some difficult situation or some short term issue, their root cause many a times, and rather most of the times, can now be traced back to a genetic vulnerability. Genetic vulnerability for depression, for example, may not manifest for several years until the person is able to deal with day to day challenges. However, when the right circumstances for increased stress on the brain, when they start manifesting, it is very much possible that that genetic vulnerability starts expressing as a disease, as depression, as something which will have direct consequences on that person's life and the way they are able to fulfill their work obligations, plus able to take care of their major significant relationships. Now, in cases like depression, the commonest symptoms which a person can hope to experience are sadness, pervasive, long term sadness lasting for a period of more than 2 weeks, which also results in anhedonia, meaning that there is a loss of pleasure, there is an inability to enjoy various activities which the person used to enjoy earlier. There is a foreboding sense of hopelessness, helplessness, and hopelessness. There is also a certain, uh, there is also sleep and appetite issues, which may get aggravated on either end of the spectrum, meaning that there may be an increase of sleep or a significant decrease in sleep. There might be a unhealthy increase in appetite or a very limited appetite, which prevents the person from eating at all and may result in significant weight loss over time during this episode of depression. Similarly, the other most common condition during from which men are increasingly showing signs of vulnerability are anxiety disorders. Now, the most common one being generalized anxiety disorder, including panic disorder with or without agoraphobia. There might be certain specific phobias which are related to certain situations. And there can also be conditions like obsessive compulsive disorder, which means that intrusive ideas are repeatedly coming to the brain, which the person is unable to shake off. And those intrusive ideas cause anxiety. And this anxiety is keeps increasing to that extent until the person does a particular activity to get rid of the anxiety. For example, the idea which keeps entering the person's mind repeatedly, unpleasantly, and causing anxiety might be that my hands are dirty. And to get rid of this anxiety, the person keeps washing hands repeatedly. And this particular behavior pattern is noticed by the person himself, as well as those people who are working around that person, living with that person, in close communication with the person, and may be seen as excessive hand washing with no logical reason to explain why it is happening. But now that this condition has been studied so thoroughly and in such depth, it is been found that this particular condition is a type of anxiety disorder and it can respond very well to treatment. And one should try to identify the signs of this anxiety disorder and see a doctor and try to get rid of this condition without suffering from it. In this day and age, it is completely unnecessary to suffer from any condition which might happen because of a brain disorder. It is possible to cure these conditions with the right medicines and with the right therapies. And as men, I would definitely want to appeal to all our viewers that please be more mindful of looking at these maladaptive behavior patterns, identifying them early, and knowing that it is strength to ask for help, that it is a sign of a good, mature brain which wants to cure itself so that it can function at its optimal level and at a level of potential with which it can be happy with. To increase the happiness in life, to increase and to unlock the potential which all of us contain within ourselves, it is necessary at times to acknowledge these hard truths and to take corrective measures, to go ahead and take those decisions which can help us live a much more healthy, fruitful, and meaningful life. This was our live for the month of August from the MindSmith on men's mental health. And I hope to see you again on the next month from the MindSmith studio. This is Dr. Satyen Sharma signing off. Thank you. Bye bye.